Welcome to Evolving on Purpose with Matt Swartz. This podcast is where real leaders share the inner work behind their breakthroughs and where you'll find the tools and stories to work through whatever is holding you back from who you're meant to be so you can make the impact you're here to make and help change the world.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Evolving on Purpose podcast. I'm here with Dave O'Dwyer. Dave O'Dwyer is a men's ADHD coach, community builder, and the founder of the League of Spiritual Gentlemen. After nearly 2 decades in professional kitchens and a personal journey through ADHD, addiction recovery, mental health struggles, and self-reinvention, Dave now helps men who feel scattered, ashamed, or disconnected build structure, emotional regulation, purpose, and brotherhood. Through his MAN method, maturity, assertiveness, and nurturing, Dave supports men in learning how to lead themselves with honesty, discipline, compassion, and a practical system that works with the ADHD brain instead of against it. His work blends lived experience, stoic reflection, personal development, and grounded men's work to help men stop hiding, reconnect with themselves, and build lives they can respect. Dave, welcome to the show.
Welcome, Matt. Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here and an honor to share my story with your audience.
Yeah, awesome. I'm really excited to hear about a lot of stuff, especially the, ADHD, men's adjacent stuff. That's my zone of interest for sure. But start us off with a little bit about yourself before we get into the deeper stuff. Tell the audience about your journey and some of the things you're most proud of as a leader.
Yeah, so my journey starts particularly with ADHD. I was diagnosed at 9. I don't look it, but I'm actually 43. So I was actually the first kid in my grade school to be actually diagnosed with ADD at the time in the late 90s. And for me, I was also really big into the Boy Scouts. So while I struggled in school, scouting was my first kind of step into leadership of where, struggling and understanding kind of school, but scouting made sense to me. And then when I was 15, I found cooking. My parents took me to a summer cooking program. I absolutely fell in love with it. And it was the first time where I was in a school program where things made sense to me, where it clicked. It had all the kind of things that I needed for my ADHD. It had urgency. It had my passion. It had accountability. It had all the things. It had enough stimulation to keep me focused on it. And so since that point, everything just kind of clicked. Yeah, I was told, because at the research at the time is, you take your Ritalin and then by the time you're 18, ADD disappears. It doesn't affect you as an adult, So I thought, all right, 15 years old, I had licked my ADHD and I thought, all right, I understand how this thing works. It only affects this part of my life. And by the time I'm done with school, I don't have to worry about it again. Which obviously is not the case. So and
I know that story. Yeah, for sure.
You hear that so often of where you're thinking, and yet, so as I got into my 20s, went to culinary school, worked in Chicago at a soup kitchen, and worked my way through the kitchens. While professionally, I was really focused. Personal life really struggled because no one talked about the emotional dysregulation. Didn't really come up. It really wasn't a lot of the other kind of underlying symptoms with the executive function. Wasn't really. I was basically told, here, take a pill and things are fixed, without understanding exactly how my brain works. So I turned to alcohol. So I was a big fan of Anthony Bourdain. I read Kitchen Confidential at 18, thinking, all right, a chef is supposed to work hard, play harder. Of course, when reading that book, he talks about his own addiction with cocaine. That's not one of my addictions, but it's the part you kind of gloss over, that he gets better from it. But it's one of those things, if you kind of gloss it over. But for me, about 3 weeks before my 30th birthday, I moved back to Seattle and I blacked out drunk, went to my old apartment that I hadn't lived in 3 months before I was initially supposed to move to Europe, and realized that things needed to change. I was arrested and, went through a 12-step program, had to go through all the kind of the court stuff. But in that process, I recognized that a lot of my ADHD, which I had kind of put off to the back burner, didn't even think about in my 20s, was now coming out sideways. So as I dealt with my addiction, I realized a lot of it was understanding my ADHD. And through that, when I finally moved to Europe about 2 years later, I tell people I moved here because I wanted to cook my way around the world, which was true, but secretly I wanted to get a girlfriend because I thought, like, after being 2-3 years sober, I thought, okay, I haven't seemed to be able to get a date, and the only time I was able to get dates was if I was blackout drunk, so I need to learn how to do it. So I ended up getting a dating coach when I moved over to Dublin, and the funny thing too is that I thought, all right, I'm going to learn social skills. I'm going to learn how to like talk to strangers and all this. And I did. But the biggest thing I learned was learning how to love and take care of myself. And while 12-step and recovery had kind of started that process, it was not until taking and doing a dating coach and learning how to interact with others sober did I actually really learn how to love myself, how to actually accept my ADHD, accept all facets of who I was, that I wasn't just this one thing, that I'm not broken. Because that was when I was, last time I went home, I found one of my old journals from when I was a kid, and in it was pages on pages that said, nobody loves me, everybody hates me, nobody loves me, everybody hates me. And it was funny because I took that, I remember reading that when I came back, and I also found my old progress reports. And when I was a kid, I was focused on, all right, you had the D's and the F's and everything else. I never read the notes, but when I read the notes of what the teachers wrote, it's like, Dave's a really great kid. He's really smart and compassionate. And like, he just struggles on these things. He doesn't seem interested in it. So yeah, that was really one of those things that was like, okay, maybe what I had thought as a kid is actually not true. What I had truly believed, and I had to really dismantle those belief structures. I had to really look at myself and, for so many years, I tried to use outside things to fill that inside hole, that inside kind of not enoughness. And it was only when I started filling it from the inside out that things started to shift, that everything started to, the way I perceived the world. I didn't try to change the world around me. I changed me, and the world changed to match that perception that I saw in the world. So now struggles don't become struggles, they become opportunities. Like one of the big things that I learned with the dating coach was, when you're going on the middle of Grafton Street to go say hi to a girl, and you're completely like, oh my God, she's going to say no. And like, you freak out. It's like, okay, instead of pass fail, it's like, what did you learn? And so I started to look at everything as if I was in a laboratory. And all right, what's the experience? What can I learn from these experiences? So instead of looking at shame for the things I did in the past or the mistakes I made, I said, all right, how can I use this as a tool? What can I learn from this? And, my level of success has been paved by my failures and mistakes. Like the path of success for me is through getting up and falling down again and picking myself up and keep moving forward. The obstacle is the way.
It's the growth mindset stuff, right? That these, rather than avoiding these challenges, right? This is exactly what's necessary to help us grow, right?
Absolutely. And during COVID, I found a group online called Men's ADHD Support Group, because I was looking for that extra kind of support with ADHD in particular. And it was started by this guy, Mark Avaford, and he just was like, all right, there needs to be a support group for men. And 2 years ago, I've been help facilitating meetings with them, and I started my own group called the League of Spiritual Gentlemen, which is more taking a really holistic, stoic kind of approach towards not just ADHD, but like helping with men's mental health and helping and giving space for men in particular, where, because, there's such a rise of like the red pill and this kind of the red pill movement, where it's like, all right, it's all these other people's problems. It's always blaming others. Yeah, I'm like, okay, I don't like, I have no control over that. I've got a hula hoop. I can control me. So I started gathering men who had that same kind of mindset of like, all right, we can't blame others. All right, so how can we fix the inside out? How can we work for the inside and build each other up and have that support, have genuine, honest conversations, get vulnerable, get to the heart of of what's really going on, and be able to share openly and honestly and feel that you can be heard, right? Having a tribe that actually hears you and feel that you're supported.
Sure.
I got that when I was in the Scouts too. I based a little bit on kind of my time for my 12 plus years doing scouting of like that bond that, I think men really need. And it's grown over the last couple of years, and especially with the partnership with Men's ADHD Support Group, which is now a non-for-profit, of just seeing how much this is needed for men. And it's to see the, not just their growth, but my own growth as I continue to grow this community, is to just see how much it's transformed and changed lives. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a superhero, and I thought, all right, I'm going to save the world. But then I've learned to redefine what world meant. Like, the world is a huge place, but the actual people that you interact with, is actually a really small group of people. So if I can change that, the people I actually interact with, and I realized too, because when I was a chef, I would try to force and control everything. It's like, okay, but if I can set the example, if I can live in alignment with my values and my beliefs, I set the example for others to invite them to do the same, to be the example. Because that's how I noticed that I can create the most impact and change. I've tried to do it where I forced it, and I've had
it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
The feedback, right?
Yeah.
We end up in the negative feedback loop, and the anxiety grows, right? The forcing, the struggling, the pushing, right? And then we used to I always joke about invisible walls, like in a video game, right? Like, it looks like I can go that way, but doesn't seem like it, right? There's there's a falling off there where the energy stops netting gains, right?
Yeah, and when my very first head chef job, I had two brothers that had worked in that restaurant for a couple of years. It was my first or second week there. I yelled at the younger brother about bananas, and he was actually doing me a favor because we ran out of bananas. He went to the store, but I didn't tell him to go to the store because I was not in control. And that Friday night, at the end of the night, they dusted their hands like, dude, we can't work with this guy, and quit. And so then I had the worst Saturday service I ever had. The stove caught on fire, everything that could possibly go wrong. And I ended up having to clean the bathrooms and do both their jobs for like 2-3 weeks while I found replacement staff. But it taught me a valuable lesson of all right, how you treat people, how you respond, especially in leadership, of the yelling at people and trying to force control upon them is not inspiration. It creates such resentment that people will they'll go the other way. They'll leave. It's not leading by example. It's not by leading in the front.
I always describe it like you're in the shower, you cup your hands and hold water, right? But then when you try to, squeeze it, right? You try to, it's gone, right? Like, you have to hold space for that, right? For those relationships. So much good stuff here, Dave. So I'm gonna break this down, and I'm gonna back you up if that's okay. And I want to get back to the work that you're doing right now. But one of the main things that we're trying to notice here is some of the consistent, invisible patterns that exist for leaders. And you highlighted one that I think is really important, is that shame, that idea of feeling broken. And I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk a little more about that. How did you sort of discover and label and name what was going on underneath the surface on the inside? And what was the process like untangling that pattern and that feeling of brokenness?
Yeah, so that that came a lot when I was doing with the dating and the relationship coach, a little bit when we were doing kind of the 4-step work and 5th-step work with going through the 12-step process. I had touched on it, but I wasn't ready to really, I was able to engage with behaviors of okay, here's how I'm I could do the amends. I know how to change behavior, but it's okay, but the internal, that was still the external, but the internal was, it was on the 3rd or 4th coaching session that we did. I had a complete breakdown on the night that we went out, and I went home and I had a really specific dream, and it was actually a memory recall of when I was 12 of an incident that happened to me with bullies. That led into kind of just getting beat up. I don't really want to go into the full details of it. And then an incident when in my late 20s, where I kind of took advantage of people. And it was just, once again, two really kind of deepful, shameful things that I had kind of almost blocked out that I had to face. Yeah. And as I started to face it, I learned how to, like, I can't change that. I can't change those experiences that happened to me. I can't change the actions and behaviors there, but I learned to forgive myself. And one of the big things is I learned what forgiveness means to me, right? Like forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about me emotionally letting go of that weight, emotionally taking that off the shoulders and not letting that hold me back anymore, and learning how to emotional pain not transformed is transmitted. So I learned how to transform that pain.
Tell us more about that, right? Because I think, so many, forgive, release, right? Like, what does that process look like for you? How have you learned to engage with that, to create that release? And I think, forgiveness as a byproduct, right?
Yeah. So it was first like going back, and I remembered that, the next morning of writing down both those experiences and sitting with them and reliving them and seeing them from the third perspective of getting myself out of the I am of, like, instead of seeing it from POV, but seeing it from the third perspective as if I'm the audience, and giving myself compassion and love of, like, as I go through it. And I remember writing a letter to my younger self to both those moments of really just releasing all the pain and the trauma of, like, what had happened and what I had gone through, and just letting it go. And remember, I did after I, like, wrote it out, put it in there. I read it out to the coach. And then we got a candle and we burned it. And we turned it into ritual, because I'm big on ritual experiences.
Sure.
Because it's not just doing it, but creating that sense of sacredness and space around it. And then this is where the amends parts kind of comes in of, like, all right, now I need to change behavior of, like, okay, when I catch myself saying, oh man, I suck. Like, I started YouTube 5 years ago, and when I do my first video, no one got views. I'm like, oh man, I'm terrible at YouTube. Oh, I'm the worst. I'm like, wait a minute. How am I going to be good? I'm not Mr. Beast. Like, I'm going to do my thing, right? Like, it's like, no one is successful their first time out. And it took a lot of, like, switching the mindset of pass fail to, what can I learn from this? All right, how do I grow from this? What's the gain? And this is the big thing when it came down to learning kind of forgiveness or dealing with my shame. Because there was moments where throughout my life, people said, oh, Dave, you have no shame. Because I would sing karaoke. I've done stand-up comedy. I will go, I've streaked in different cities when I was younger, and I've skinny dipped in multiple oceans, because that's on my bucket list, and can do these crazy kind of things that people think, oh my God, I'd be so ashamed to do that. But I'd be like, no, the thing that I get shameful over is having that honest conversation, like, with the tough conversations that I've had with my partner, my wife, where we almost had to call off the engagement at one point. We were really close to where there was a lot of pent up feelings that I wasn't expressing. That's where I felt shameful about, like, learning how to express myself and knowing that I was safe enough to, with, the person that I love, that I'm closest to, that, hey, I don't like your behaviors. This needs to change. Like, and like, because I was so seeking love and validation from everybody else, that until I started to love myself. And that was the big one. I was learning how to give myself the compassion that I was seeking from everyone else on the outside. And it started by learning how to just say, I'm perfectly imperfect. I don't have to be perfect. I am perfectly imperfect, and that is good enough. I don't have to be perfect. Like, perfect is the enemy of good enough. And it's learning how to just be me. And I don't have to be a doer. I just have to be a beer. Like, I'm a human being, and just accepting all my flaws and recognizing my flaws can sometimes be my strengths, and my strengths can sometimes be a flaw. And it's all how I choose to perceive it. And that's where it comes down to my responsibility of my choice of how I wish to view the world. It becomes my sense of being a man, because I never felt in my 20s, because I grew a beard out now because that was one of the dating coach said, because when I don't have a beard, I look like I'm 12. Like
I share the same problem.
I was gonna say, you got a baby face excuse, so you understand. I'm like, all right, you look so young, and then it's like, all right, but then what does it mean to actually be like masculine? But it's like, all right, I don't fall into traditional masculinity because of the emotional dysregulation as well. Like, I feel deeply, and I like cooking is considered like, even though mostly in professional kitchens is a mostly male dominated, not so much anymore, but still a mostly male dominated thing. But when you think of cooking, it kind of falls into the female, like, all right,
sure.
You know, like I do all the cooking at home, like, and I love it. And like, you know, I've had some of my, you know, friends from high school be like, you do all the cooking? I'm like, yeah, I was a professional chef. Why wouldn't I? Like, she ate rice pudding before I met her. Like, of course. Like, we have our strengths and weaknesses. Like, it doesn't make me any less masculine because of the thing that I do. Masculinity doesn't come from external actions. It comes from internal values and beliefs. At least that's my take on it.
Yeah, so a couple of really good things I want to get into there. So first is, I just think that, you know, for guys with ADHD, like both of these things you're talking about are really important. The shame cycle and getting out of that shame cycle. And also this idea of like feeling grown up, feeling like an adult, feeling, you know, man enough, right? Taking the first one, right? Like, you know, you're describing how it has to start from the inside first, right? And so many of the leaders and high performers I work with, they go on this rabbit hole, which I think, you know, you're talking about, where I spend my whole life trying to be successful externally at work, you know, find a role, you know, wherever it is. And then I'm thinking, if I keep chasing that down and I keep getting better and better, I'm going to feel more good enough. And while it is to some degree having accomplishments can be helpful, inevitably what happens is we keep rising and the challenge just keeps increasing. And if our sense of self hasn't grown to meet those challenges, then the gap between our sense of self and the intensity of the challenge becomes more and more obvious. And so it actually becomes counterproductive rather than productive. I don't know if that's something you've experienced and you would agree with.
Yeah, no, especially when I was like pursuing, so I had this huge goal of like, all right, I want to be an executive chef, a head chef by the time I was 30. I got it when I was 28. And then I moved to Seattle and I was like, all right, I'm 29. I've got 1 year to try to get in Seattle magazine's 30 under 30 chefs or something like that.
Sure.
Like, you know, I kept making these like, it was like, all right, it's always that, if only, or if when I get this, if when's, then I'll have succeeded, then I'll have done this. And that's the thing I've had to switch, is not if when I get that, it's like, okay, I'm in it now. Like, you know, the good old times, people always wonder, like, you know, when was the good old times? Now is the good old times in perspective of your later life. So learning how to enjoy the moment of now. Like, I read a fantastic book, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. And one of the biggest kind of takeaways I got from it, he said, there's no ordinary moments. Every moment is extraordinary. And so every moment, like the moment we're having right now, will never happen again, right? Like this moment itself is unique. And if you were listening, when you're listening, whoever's listening to this and when they're listening to us, that moment in your life is an extremely unique moment. And learning how to give this moment, because this is the moment you're alive. You know, we spend so much time stuck in the future or stuck in the past, and learning how to just be in the moment. And this is actually where ADHDers succeed the most, is actually when they get into the moment and hyperfocus kicks in. You can accomplish
it can be beautiful, but it's this double-edged sword, right? Because if it's not, right, like the fundamental reality of ADHD is that emotional regulation issue, right? I always tell people, like, I've been doing this work for a long time, and as you know, I was diagnosed at second grade, so I think similar age as you, right? This notion that it's a focus and attention issue, well, that's a secondary byproduct. The reality is it's an emotional regulation issue, which can lead to inattention, right? But if I'm feeling bored, if I'm feeling negative, then whoop, there I am. I'm in the past. I'm in the future. I'm somewhere else, right? And so it's ultimately this journey of reconciling our emotional life and learning how to process and feel those things that people with ADHD actually have real trouble feeling. It's either too big or too small, right? I'm either overstimulated or understimulated. So being able to figure out how to process those emotions in a way that allows us to engage in the present moment fully. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. This is why I do a daily journaling practice in the evening and night. I now kind of switched and use ChatGPT to help me because I struggle with actual writing. So I like to use voice notes, or I used to do voice note dumping, of where one of the things the first thing I usually give to clients is like, okay, you need to the brain dump morning and the evening time, all the thoughts, everything out. Because if you think, as you said, right, it's not a deficit of attention. It's so much attention and so much input coming in that we're overloading. You're overloading your memory in your brain, right? Like the RAM is completely full.
Exactly. Yeah, the RAM is full. Totally.
So you have
too many tabs open in the Chrome browser.
Exactly.
Right?
So it's just like, all right, dumping all that out and being able to look at it from a third perspective, because when you read it out again, you're like, oh shit, here's the pattern. And this is where a pattern recognition ability comes in of like, okay, here, now I can actually change it because we're not stuck in it. We're actually be able to, you can actually manipulate it like dough. You can actually play with it because it's not just in the brain.
See the pattern, feel the pattern, change the pattern, right? And the good news for anybody out there with ADHD like us is you're great at pattern recognition, but the bad news is it's that second step, right? I mean, so often it's like, okay, I did the work. I went to therapy. Like I see the belief, right? I can write down the belief. But I think that I tell my clients it's brain poop, right? Like you just got to let it out. You've just, dump, right? Whether it's writing, talking, whatever that ChatGPT, whatever that looks like, right? Being able to see the pattern is important, but taking that time to actually feel and process through the pattern, right? That's the game changer.
Oh, absolutely. Because you have to be able to experience and run through those emotions. So it actually goes, it's like a roller coaster stuck on a loop, right? And you got to let it go all the way through to get to the end. So then you can actually finally step off. Otherwise, you're just going to be stuck on that loop over and over and over again. It's learning how to allow to feel things and allow it to go through you and not hold on, right? Because so much of the time it's that tension of holding on to things. Like, I just got to hold on to it. And it's like, wait a minute. If I just let go and let things flow, and the breath, right? Such a powerful tool of just learning how to breathe through it, feel the feelings, I do an exercise of where I have people put right hand on chest, left hand on belly. And I used to do this right before I go on stage when I do comedy. I was actually, the fifth rated comedian by Times of Malta in 2018, which is impressive because there was only 3 comedians at the time, but I was in the top 5. For bad jokes like that, but
very good.
But so what I do right before,
so you were doing stand up?
Yeah, I did stand up in multiple countries. I like to say I'm an international comedian, and all that means is I've done it in multiple countries. So it sounds more impressive.
Anywhere, right? Yeah, for sure. I'm an improv background, so I hang out with comedians, right? So yeah, for sure.
One of my good friends and who was the officiant at our wedding is an improv comedian. So we ran the whole wedding like an improv comedy set a little bit. It was a good wedding. But what I do before going on stage is that you'd always get those nerves right before you're going to talk in front of a group, so I'd put right hand on chest, left hand on belly. And I'd just start breathing, and I'd be like, oh my God, I'm nervous. I'm going to fail. I can't remember my jokes, anything like this. I'm like, okay, take a big breath in. All right, what's my heart doing right now? What's doing in the body? And try to disassociate, I'm freaking out, to what am I physically feeling? Let's go back to physical sensations. What am I physically feeling in the moment right now? And by taking the deep breaths and just, all right, right now, my chest is feeling kind of sweaty. My legs are tight, and it just helps me disassociate from this word of I'm scared or I'm freaked out to I'm feeling this thing. Because for me, the physical sensation of being anxious and nervous is almost identical physical sensation wise to feeling excited.
100%. Well, it's not just it's the same neural circuitry, right? And it's the feeling of too much stimuli, right? And so how do we got a 6-lane highway, the cars are backed up, things are starting to get into accidents, right? But actually, I'm really excited about this. I want to be doing this. This is important to me, right? And so it's just that, yeah, for my clients with anxiety, ADHD, a lot of the both, right? It's just really building that mastery of emotional processing. What does that look like physically? What does that look like emotionally? What are these practices we can use? Breathing, journaling, walking. I'm a big fan of bilateral stimulation. But and I just try to bring it all kind of around, right? A big part is, how do I process the emotion going on right now, the overload going on right now? But then the next step is, how do I understand and tie this back to when I felt this way before, right? So I get out, okay, so we get through the nervousness, I'm out there on stage, I mess up my joke, right? And then, the shame's back, right? Okay, how do we get into that? Where does that come from? Why can we let go? How can we let go of some of that, right? Because this is going to happen again. This is going to happen, if you're going to do stand-up comedy, this is going to happen every 5 times, every 3 times, every single time, right? So how do we process that rather than avoid it completely, right? And that's where, coming back to what you were saying, like, that's where the growth is, right? We don't get good at processing those incremental failures, then we never grow and we stay stuck.
Exactly. This is how you know if a joke works or doesn't. Like, all right, hey, that worked with that audience, but it didn't work with this audience. Okay, if I tweak it. And I like to take curiosity. I think that's one of my greatest tools as well, of looking at things with curiosity, of like being curious about it, of like doing this self-examination, but not through a lens of shame, but through curiosity of like, being genuinely interested of getting to know me. Like, one of the things that I don't know you do with your clients, but like, I usually ask a question in the beginning of like, from scale 1 to 10, how well do you know yourself and how well do you love yourself? And they're like, oh, I know myself pretty well, but all right, how much do you love yourself? It's usually like a 0 to 3 or 2. I'm like, okay, you seem to know yourself really well, but how much do you really know yourself? How do you know your processes? How do you know these like subconscious habits and patterns and behaviors that you've developed as a kid? How do you know they're still serving you now? Like, how much is you just living on autopilot? Like, one of my favorite kind of phrases, I think I took it from a film, is emotions are like children. You can't let them drive the car, nor can you stuff them in the trunk. They belong in the back seat. Like, it's like recognizing of like, all right, how many times I've let my emotions run, like, especially with ADHD, like, the emotional dysregulations, emotions hijack the system, and now we're going 80, having 3 drinks, and we're gonna crash into a car. Or like in my teens, I remember getting beat up and crying outside of the weight room and thinking, okay, emotions don't serve me whatsoever. I need to shut them all down. Yeah. And then it's like,
throw them in the trunk.
Throw them in the trunk. They don't serve me anything. And then I live this hollow existence wondering what's wrong with like feeling. Yeah.
Because, a trauma like that, like, now you're disconnected from social engagement, right? You're hiding away from people. You're worried you're going to be hurt or any of that, right? And which, at the time you can't do anything. I mean, at that age, right? Even if you don't have ADHD, most people can't work through that kind of emotion, right? It's something you have to double back to as an adult. But it sounds like you've been able to, which is awesome.
Yeah, no, because when you're in it, then you don't have all the tools yet of like, especially in the 90s, it wasn't talked about to like, all right, how do you actually process and deal with emotions? It's like, oh, the emotions just happen. You deal with it. You go along with it. You just, like, you fell down, hurt your knee, you pick yourself back up, keep going. We don't want to hear it. Just keep working. Just
no crying in baseball, Dave.
Exactly.
Yeah. We have come a long way. I mean, even in the last 10 years, it's been, I remember moving back to town and going into private practice and standing up in rooms and talking about anxiety and people being like, right. And now these days it's like, yeah, whatever, man. Like, yeah, there's 12 of you on the corner. I'm not excited anymore. So I think, we've come a long way. I think, it's still, I think there are subsets that are still really hard. And I think certainly harder for guys in terms of not being allowed to feel these things, not being socially acceptable. Tell me more about your work. You were talking about the work with the League of Spiritual Gentlemen. Tell me about the work and tell me about some things that have really moved you in what you've been doing.
Yeah, no, it's especially when it comes to like emotions, right? Like for many men, because like I said, I'm based in Ireland, so I deal a lot with people from Ireland, UK, all over Europe. And, the one emotion that's, I think, acceptable, and I think even in the States too, right, for men to express is anger. That if there's any emotion that men can express at any time, it's anger. But like feeling sad, anxious, worried, like,
guilty, ashamed, right? Like
shame.
Men don't learn how to process shame most of the time.
Exactly.
Right? Just do better is all we get,
Do better. No one cares about you. It goes back to a Chris Rock joke. He says, the only things that get unconditional love are, children, women, and dogs. Men are only loved based on the condition of what they provide. And so many men are ingrained with that kind of John Wayne type of like, all right, I can't show emotion. I just have to provide. If I want to get love, I have to provide. And I get so many men who are struggling. Maybe they're a lot of them late diagnosed ADHD. Some of them just in a point of life where they don't feel like they belong anywhere, that they are just completely lost and where no one seems to give a shit about them, that they just kind of coming in very broken of the sense of, no one loves them, and they don't even know how to love themselves. They don't feel supported in anything. They have to put everything on their shoulders. So one of the things that we do in the midweek men's circle is our core questions in our round one is, what's one win of the week? How was your week? Just asking people, what did you do this week? How was your week? How are you? What's a win? What's something you're grateful for? What's a goal you're working on, right? Like just giving them the opportunity. So anyone who shows up, even if they come in late, most ADHDers, they show up late and I don't care. Like I still give them that opportunity to be able to open their mouths, because so many men don't have the opportunity to just talk, just to feel like they can share honestly and openly with what's actually going on. Don't have to put on bravado. Don't have to hey, I gotta look all fancy because there's a girl over there and I want to hook up with her. Or I don't want to look weak in front of other people, or I have to play the status game. So it's so much of where I've had guys who've been with me kind of to the beginning and see their evolution and process of kind of struggle and self-doubt to self-reliance and self-leadership, and moving on to getting married, having kids. I've had a few kind of clients who've gone through, when I first started working with them, he was thinking about like breaking up with his girlfriend and now wants to propose, and they're having a baby in September, and he's moving careers out of construction because his dad did construction, so he thought he had to do construction, but he actually really wants to be a primary school teacher. So we got him on the path of working to become a primary school teacher, to follow what he actually enjoys doing instead of what other people tell you what to do, right? So many times we're given, people say this is the path you have to do, but you don't have to do that. This is the thing of you're an adult, you have autonomous choice, and you don't have to necessarily fall into someone else's prescribed path for your life. You get to make those choices. And this is where I think it comes down to the three core values that we talk a lot about: maturity, which is personal responsibility, right? It starts by taking personal responsibility for your life and where you want to go, and starts by being mature. Assertiveness, which so many guys that I deal with usually fall more on the people-pleasing side than the aggressive side, but I've got a few guys in there too. Learning how to say what you need to say without guilt or shame, right? One of my biggest things was, because we're so much craving love, we fall into people pleasing. We fall into oh my God, if I, speak up for my values and what I believe in, then they're not going to love me, or they're going to hate me. And then that's the end of it. It's wait a minute. No, if I have my maturity and set in who I am, I can set boundaries, and people respect boundaries. You get way more respect when you actually set healthy boundaries with others. It's one of the things
trying to make everybody happy. For
exactly.
Sure. It's definitely not attractive. It definitely doesn't engender respect, right?
Yeah, and it was one of the things that when my wife and I, when we were engaged, where we nearly broke up, it was me had fallen into that people pleasing thing of what saved it was me stepping up and putting in really firm boundaries of it wasn't mean or vicious, but it was no, I had to stand up for my values and rights of what I believe in, of no, this is what I want out of the relationship. Here are my needs. This is where I need to meet me halfway. Let's And from that, came down to then the third quality, which is nurturing leadership. It's growing and becoming the example of learning to show up for others and being there and these are the three qualities to me that make up what it means to be a man. Because that was a question I wrestled with in my 20s and 30s. What does it mean to be a man? It means being mature. That means taking responsibility. It means setting your boundaries. And it means nurturing and caring for others, of being a leader and a leader doesn't mean, you do this. It means leading from the front, leading by example, of nurturing growth in others so that everyone rises together. And I've seen that within the league, within my own relationships, and just around me, of just when we all start to do that together, it becomes a shining light that other people are more attracted to, and it grows.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love the framework. I think having a framework is so important. It helps create structure. I think the thing that's really important, if we're trying to create through lines here, right? I've been doing this work for 15 years, and I'm at the point where I really see where the individual work stops. And it's really important to find that support, find that help. You talked about finding a dating coach. It's that, the mentorship that you found in the men's ADHD community and what you're creating now. Just, can you speak to what has felt so important about community to you that you decided that that's the direction you wanted to take this and really move in that group work?
Well, it's always something that's been really important to me since I was a kid, since kind of Boy Scouts. Because within scouting too, is you had a troop and you had a patrol, and even in kitchens, right? Like when you work in a kitchen, it's a small, intimate team. You're working with 5 or 6 dudes, 5 or 6 people, 6-7 days, 6-7 days a week, 12-hour days, you're in that kind of community, work of where, as much as a lot of stuff is done individually, when everyone works the station, right? You may be on saute, I may be on grill, another guy on oven, another guy doing salads, but it's all right. In order to get all the food to the pass, we all have to work together. And it's learning how to see everyone's strengths and weaknesses. And as I've moved over to Europe, I noticed myself really craving community, and I kind of lost. I didn't really feel connected with the 12-step community AA as much as I did when I moved over here. I was like, all right, so I need a community of like-minded fellows. And so it's all right, men's ADHD support group is fantastic, but it was all right, that's mostly US based. All right, I need people in Europe. I need people around me. So if I can't find it, then I might as well make it
and build it. And build the group you want to be in.
Exactly.
Sure.
So, and then from doing that with their support, we've been able to build a community, and it starts with just one or two. It started with just 1 or 2, and now we've grown to about 60, 70 kind of people within our community. So,
that's amazing, Dave. Yeah, and I think the important thing for people to hear is that it doesn't start with 20. It starts with 1. It starts with 2, right? The community builds, right? And that's the same for me with the, podcast, right? It doesn't, like you said, you're starting YouTube. It's not going to be up here. It's going to be here. And we got to slowly but surely grow that. And I think especially for people with ADHD, I always use the example. So I spill some rice in my kitchen and I look down at the ground and it looks like a million frickin' pieces of my ADHD brain goes, we'll never pick this up, which is what my 7-year-old says, right? And it's just hang on. Grab the vacuum, we will handle this, right? But it's each little step that it takes to grow a community. So I love that. I'm noticing the time. We have to wind down. I have 2 questions I want to ask before we go. The first one, Dave, is what does living on purpose mean to you right now? Not as an idea, but the reality of your day-to-day life.
So living on purpose for me right now, that means living with intention. So this is kind of the first time of where I'm stepping out of where I don't work in a kitchen, so I work for myself. So it's it's me versus me. It's I'm my own boss, and I can be a great boss. I can also be a pretty terrible boss. So it's so living with intention means okay, I have a North Star, and that is I want to build this community, and I want to be a vocal shining beacon for men with ADHD that there is a way out of guilt, shame. And in order to do that, I can't just shout it, I have to live it. So it comes down to daily practice, daily routine, doing my yoga, doing my morning meditations, building structure, and my scaffolding. I don't like to call it like, because if it's too structured, then I freak out. So it's like, all right, I got to give myself the accordion structure where it has bounce and it waves with it.
Box and whisker plot. There's a we got a little zone we can move.
Exactly. So it flows with it. So each day I show up and I'm excited for it. And on the days that I'm not like, oh man, I don't feel, I'm like, okay, it's not about how I feel at this moment. It's all right. This is about the greater mission. And, and as you said too, it's about I've stopped setting the bar so high. I've set the bar so low on a daily basis that I can literally trip over it. And because for me, I need to create motivation doesn't work as a great tool for me, but momentum does. So if I can get one little win, which is another little win, another little win, another little win, it goes back to What About Bob, the movie What About Bob? And he talks about baby step to the door, baby step to the elevator, baby step, baby step, baby step. And enough small little steps may seem inconsequential in the moment, but when you zoom out and you look at everything from a broader angle, that's how you actually climb the mountain. It's, you're not taking giant leaps. It's small incremental things, and it's the small little daily actions, giving yourself grace when you fall down, picking yourself back up, and keep taking one small step. And, like today, you were my boulder. I do 3 boulders a day. And you're like, all right, I want to get ready here. And I was actually on an hour early because of the time change thing, and I got confused. But I was like, okay, cool. And instead of being like, oh man, you idiot, you hopped on an hour. I'm like, oh, cool. I have an hour to like knock out an email. All right. Can I turn this into productive time of like, all right. There was a thing I was putting off. Oh, cool. I've got 1 hour to do it in. Can I do it in 30 minutes? And then I can watch 20 minutes of YouTube before I chat with Matt, and then do 10 minutes of like quick prep to make sure I'm ready. And it's a real life example of like learning how to take those opportunities. And
if you can't do it in the small moments, how are you going to do it in the big ones?
Exactly.
So last question, Dave, and let me just say before we go, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I think we share a lot in common, and we've had a lot of similarities on our journey. So I really appreciate all of your vulnerability. If your life and your work ultimately succeeded beyond what you've imagined, what do you hope changes in the world because you were here?
Oh, wow, because one of my biggest struggles is a fear of success, not a failure. So I think ultimately is that I have made someone's life, just one person's life, a little bit better. That they've gained a tool that has helped them to succeed, which has then helped them to help somebody else, which has helped them to help somebody else. And it becomes that cascading effect. So if I can have, and I already have evidence of creating effective change in one person, which I know will lead to effective change in others. So if I can create and become a positive source for just one other person in the world, it doesn't have I would love to have 20 million people that I can affect and change and be the Tony Robbins of ADHD people. But really it comes down to if I can help one guy learn to love themselves a little bit more, learn how to accept themselves and to see the amazing human being that they really are, that they struggle to see. If I can do that for just one person, everything else is frosting on top.
That's awesome. And the reality, of course, and for so many of the listeners, right, you can only really do that for others when you can do that for yourself, right?
You can't fill from an empty cup. So
it becomes pretty much automatic. So I love it. David, this was an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. Sounds like awesome work you're doing. Listeners will be able to check out the League of Spiritual Gentlemen, through the description. And thanks so much for coming on, Dave. And I wish you all the best in your work. And we'd love to see you again and have you back on. So thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Matt. I really appreciate this opportunity for allowing me to share my story with your audience. And I hope someone got something of value out of this. And once again, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, you're welcome. So if this episode resonated with you, this is exactly why we're building this. The work that you're doing matters, and it's not meant to be done alone. So make sure you're subscribed, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening, and share this with another leader in your life who's ready for something deeper. Also follow along on Instagram between episodes for more tools, reflections, real conversation. And please let us know what you want us to explore next so we can help you on your journey. This is bigger than a podcast. It's a movement. It's a community of authentic leaders choosing to grow, to heal, and step into who they were meant to be so we can make the impact the world actually needs. Thanks for being here. And as always, let's keep evolving on purpose together.